Hello, good day. I'm Dr. Melanie Gigrat, and today we will be talking about computer data analysis. So, in this topic, we have three important things to be discussed. First, letter A, data definition. Letter B, data encoding. And letter C is data management. Remember that you are trying to understand this concept simply because you are going to use computer in your analysis. That's why it is computer data analysis. So you are expected to use either the statistical software that we call as SPSS, or we can also use the PSPP, or if not, you can just simply use Microsoft Excel. So in this video, we will just be covering the data definition. So what is data definition? So we have, of course, to learn how to do the coding schemes, what is variable names and labels in the computer data analysis, and what is value names and label also in the data analysis. So this is just simply assigning numbers to our variables, or rather to the categories of our variables. So let's start. So for the coding scheme, we will be assigning number to a categorical data. Why? It is because it is a requirement of the statistical software that we are going to use. And just in case you wonder if the software can read the data that is written in words or in characters other than numbers, yes, it can read it, except that it cannot recognize similar codes or similar categories. Like, for example, if we will just simply encode all capital letters of the word male, this is different from the word male wherein it is all small letters. Or if it is capital M only, letter A, small letter L, small letter E. So remember, when we are encoding, it's possible that we are not using the same orientation of our letters. And aside from that, later if you're going to do statistical analysis like using t-test, using other inferential statistics, it also requires a number. So it cannot read letters. That's why there is a need to understand the coding scheme. Okay, let us move. So for instance, this is our questionnaire. So we have letter A, personal information. So for this, we asked our respondent for his or her name, but it is of course optional because of the Data Privacy Act. And for age, so it is just a line indicating that the respondent must give the actual age, because for other questionnaire, it is also possible that you provided the age bracket, wherein the respondent will just tick it or check it or place a cross mark. For current relationship status, for example, so here it is in a relationship or not in a relationship. So for sex, we have male and female. For socioeconomic status, so we have the following. So we have a lot of money and properties and can buy whatever we want, until income is very little or not always enough for the family need. So in doing this, or in the coming up with, let's say, with coming up with the coding scheme for this questionnaire, we will be utilizing, of course, the numbers, or we will be using numbers for us to do that. So what are we going to do? Let's go back to that. So let's proceed here for a while. So let's go back to our slide. Let's start with the data definition, particularly coding scheme. So we will go back to our questionnaire. So this is our questionnaire. So using this questionnaire, so remember that as mentioned, for example, for male, we will be using 1 for male, 2 for female when we encode our data. And then for current relationship status, it can also be that 1 means in a relationship, and we will be using 0 for not in a relationship. So for age, there's no need to give a coding scheme for age because obviously it's already a number because age is a numerical data. So our objective is just to give or to assign numbers so that all the data that will encoded later in Microsoft Excel or in our statistical software is already converted into numbers. Now next, let us also consider socioeconomic status. So how about for socioeconomic status? So let's move to our socioeconomic status. So here we can use the numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But if I'll assign number 1 here, or the first one, and 2, 3, 4, 5 for the succeeding until 5 for the last one, we have to go back also to the descriptions or the definition. Though for sex, for example, and for current relationship status, there's no need for us to think about it. But for socioeconomic status that is representing an ordinal data, numerical or other categorical data with rank, we have also to make sure that it aligns the numbers that we assigned. Why? Because of course, when you look at our values here or the description, we have a lot of money and we can buy whatever we want. So which means it means that if the respondent answered this, it also means that in terms of wealth, the respondent has higher wealth compared when we say that income is very little, not always enough for the need of the family. So which means also that less wealth for the category or the description given in the last item. So if we will be sticking to 1 to 5 here, later if we will do some analysis like correlation, it's possible that we will encounter problem because we are going to state that the higher the number means that the higher the socioeconomic status, which is of course not, because in the case of this questionnaire, we have a lower number for a higher socioeconomic status. So before you're going to give a value, you also need to consider if our variable is nominal or ordinal. So right now, of course, for sure, you already know the difference between nominal and ordinal. So we are done with that discussion. So just, of course, to review, we know that sex is a nominal data because male is not higher than female and female is also not higher than male. So which means that there is no ranking for sex. While for current relationship status, we cannot also claim that in a relationship are those persons who are higher than those not in a relationship. So we cannot, again, make a stand which is higher or which is lower. So current relationship status is also a nominal data. Unlike for socioeconomic status, this is ordinal data because we can arrange it according to the lowest socioeconomic status to the highest socioeconomic status. So if we will be providing socioeconomic status scheme, coding scheme, rather, it's better to assign 1 for the last item, which is income is very little, and 2 for little, 3 just sufficient, 4 very sufficient, and 5 is a lot of money. So that later, if we will be using problems that, of course, needs to be correlated with socioeconomic status, there is no problem whether the value is higher or lower, because it means that the higher the value, it means higher socioeconomic status. Unlike the first one, higher value means lower socioeconomic status. So it might cause confusions to some of our readers. And even for the respondents later, when he or she is already researcher, when he or she is already providing the interpretation of the given data. So for sex, for current relationship status, it doesn't matter if we give 1 for male and 2 for female, or vice versa, or 0 for female, 1 for male. So it also doesn't matter even for current relationship status, because anyway, these are categorical, particularly a nominal data. Now let's move to the next one. So assuming again that this is our second part of the questionnaire. So let's just make it this bigger. So we have here part 2, or letter B, life satisfaction scale. So the instruction is, below are 5 statements that you may agree or disagree with. Using 1 to 7 scale below, indicate your agreement with each item by placing the appropriate numbers on the line preceding that item. So please be open and honest in responding. So the items are, in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. The condition of my life are excellent. I am satisfied with my life. So far, I have gotten the important things I want in life. And the last item is, if I could live my life over, I would change almost nothing. So if we will be encoding this, of course, we have to follow the assigned numbers here. So remember, it's the coding scheme is already provided, because 1 means it is strongly disagree, and 7 means it is strongly agree. So as you can see and observe here, higher number is given to higher agreement, while the lowest value is for this agree. Now let's move to the second one, letter B. So how about variable names and labels? So when we also encode our data, it's very important that we know what is our variable names and what are its label, especially if it's too long and we cannot, of course, encode the whole thing. So in encoding, there is also a rule stating that we can use acronyms, or if we're going to encode as much as possible, we can make it short as possible. And if we will be using SPSS, there are additional rules, like we have to consider that when we encode, we're not going to place spaces, because spaces are not allowed. And we're not going to start with a number, because the number is an illegal character in naming variables. And we will not be using special characters like dollar signs, hashtags, and others. Okay, so for example, if we will go back again to our questionnaire, so what are the variable names for our personal information questionnaire? So we will simply use, of course, age. There's nothing to change about this. We will simply use age, sex. For current relationship status, since it's too long, we can provide a shortcut like, let's say, CRS, So this means that this is now our variable name. This will be our variable name. And the variable label is the current relationship status. While for socioeconomic status, so just the same with our current relationship status, so we will also make use of acronym like SES. So again, SES is our variable name and the label is socio-economic status. So this is what the variable name and variable labels is all about. Now, for age, so it's up to you if you still want to define what or to give the label of age. So it can be also possible that in some questionnaire that you're going to encounter, it will ask for the father's age, mother's age, and the respondent's age. So it's possible that you will also encounter questionnaire that will ask you all of this. Of course, it depends on the nature of the data or the nature of the research. Now, if you will be given this, so maybe you can provide a name like age F corresponding to the father's age M corresponding to the mother's age, or simply age for the respondent's age. Or you can also place HR, which means the age of the respondent. So that's the idea. So instead of placing father's age, mother's age, or age, you come up with acronyms. So these are the one that we call it as name, and father's age, mother's age, and age are called the label. Okay, let's move. So let's also go to our letter B. So let's clear this first. Now, if we are also going to provide acronyms for this, so it is also possible that, of course, when we encode this, we have to encode the responses of the respondent. So later, we are going to show that. So what are the variables here and what are its label. So for this item, for example, so you're not going to encode the whole sentence in most ways. My life is close to my ideal. So what you're going to do is maybe you can place S1, and then for the second one, S2, S3, S4, and S5. And what is the label? The label is S1 means it corresponds to the statement 1, meaning or stating that in most ways my life is close to my ideals. So if these are the names, the variable names, these are the labels. We call this as the labels. Okay, so let's proceed to letter C. Now, what is value name and label? So this is actually similar to our coding scheme, except that we are naming the codes or the number assigned as the value names. And the label corresponds now to the descriptions or categories. Now, going back again to our same profile variables, for example. So let's say what we are saying here is that the one and two, which is assigned to the categories male and female. And then let's say in a relationship and not in a relationship, assigned to 0 and 1. So 1 and 2 here is called the value name, and male and female corresponds to the label. So the same here, this is what we call the value name, and these are the value labels. So the value 1 is corresponding, of course, to value label in a relationship. And the value 0 corresponds to the value label not in a relationship. So we need all of this, of course, because if we will be using SPSS as one example of the software, statistical software. So let's consider, again, clearing our data. And let's open SPSS. Let's open SPSS. And let's show how to place this in our SPSS. And of course, we are going also to show why there's a need to craft or to come up with all of this. So we have to understand. So we will just simply ignore that part. So this is our SPSS data editor. So if you forgot its name, so it's just here, data editor. And so it consists of two sheets, the data view and the variable view. So where do we encode our variables? It is in the variable view. So let's do this side by side. Okay, so what are our variables? So we have our personal information. So we will be encoding this. I'll not encode name anymore. Anyway, it's optional. But make sure that when you encode your questionnaire or the data gathered, you have to assign numbers to the papers. So you have to write, for instance here, for question number 1 or for respondent 1, so let's try to fill in this first. So my age, the age of the respondent rather, example is 25 years old, and she's female. She is in a relationship, and he also ticked that she her income is just sufficient. So assuming that this is the responses of the respondent. So how are we going to, of course, encode that later? So for the name here corresponds to the variable name. So I'll start with age, followed by sex, followed by CRS. As mentioned, we use acronyms. So just in case, just to show you if I'll place space, relationship, and enter this. So it will prompt you that variable name contains an illegal character. And let's encode SES, meaning socioeconomic status. But I'll just show you also, if I'll start with numbers, because this is the fourth profile, for example, it's 4SES. Again, it will prompt that variable names contain an illegal character. So we cannot, again, use number. So SES. So for the type, so this is the type. Since we already gave a coding scheme, so it means that all our variables is already numeric, meaning that the data that we will be typing or encoding is the number. So it's already a number. So for the, what are the important things that we need to consider? This is the variable name and this is the variable label. So as mentioned, label corresponds to the definition of the name. So like, for example, CSR corresponds to current relationship status. So it's already okay to place a space here when you are giving your label. SES corresponds to socioeconomic status. So you can also define age or sex, like placing age of the respondents, sex of the respondents. But anyway, since age and sex are already understood, so if you will be encoding this, maybe you cannot, there's no need to consider placing its label, except if, as mentioned in our example, we have 2 or 3 variables that is about age, like age of father, age of mother, and age of the respondents. Now, in our next column, we have the word values. In this values, so this is also what we talk about, which is when we click this, that it will show you that it requires the codes that we give or the codes that we used or we assigned in our variables. So as mentioned, as much as possible, we are going to use a numerical data. So for age, there's no problem with this because it's already numerical. But for sex, we assign that 1 is male and 2 is female. So let's just also integrate that here. So 1 is male, 2 female. For this, if it's in a relationship, we will be using 1. 0 is not in a relationship. So we also explained here that to be consistent and to avoid confusions later, we will be assigning lower number for lower socioeconomic status, followed by, of course, going to the highest socioeconomic status, 5. Okay, so how are we going to place that in our SPSS? So for sex, we have to place it here. So this is the value labels and this is the value and the labels that we are talking about. So the value name is 1 and the value, or rather the value, simply value labels is now, what do you call this? We have sex, this is male, and then 2 is female. So you have to click add and click okay. So for social current relationship status, you also need to place that. So the value is 1. The label is in a relationship and click add. 0 is not in a relationship, click add and click OK. For socioeconomic status, so we have, of course, to encode all of this. So it's very long. So let's say, for example, for 1, maybe we can just use the first description given. Income is very little, not always enough for the family's need. Then click add. So of course, you have to finish all of this until 5. So 2, so let me just use shortcut. 3 means just sufficient. But later, if you're going to do this, of course, make sure that it is complete. Very sufficient. And 5 is lot of money. Click okay. Now, in the data view where you will encode the data, so you have to place the actual age, 25. Sex is female, so we will be encoding 2. CRS is 1. Socioeconomic status is 3. So that is how to encode our data. But as mentioned, do not forget to place or to assign number to our respondent. So this corresponds to respondent number 1. Now moving to the next slide. Here. So let's again clear this first. So again, assuming that these are the responses in this questionnaire. So in most ways, my life is close to ideal. Let's say slightly agree. So 5. In the condition of my life or excellent, slightly agree also. 5. I am satisfied with my life. Let's say strongly agree. I have gotten the important things that I want in life. Let's say slightly disagree. If I could live my life over, I would almost change nothing. Let's say strongly agree. So assuming that these are the responses again of our respondent number 1, because this is a continuation. So let's also show how this will be placed again in our SPSS. So I went back to the variable view. So as mentioned, we will be using, for a while, we will be using S1, S2, S3, S4, and S5. So we will be placing it here. So let's do that. S1, S2, let's go back. S1, S1, S2, S3, S4, and S5. And of course, here you have to place in most ways, my life is close to my ideal. Then followed by the conditions of my life are excellent. Next, I am satisfied with my life. Of course, you have to finish all of this. And then for the values, it's your option if you would still encode 1 corresponds to strongly disagree until 7 to strongly agree, or simply just disregard that part. Or anyway, if you're going to do that, let's just show it here. So I just use acronym. So 1 is SD, 2 is D, 3 is slightly disagree, and 4 is, that's number 4, neither. 5 is slightly agree, and 6 is agree, and 7 is strongly agree. Okay. So you can also copy and paste it to the rest of the database. Okay. Then to let's go back to our data view. So let's do the encoding. So S1 is 5, S2 is 5, S3 is 7, S4 is 3, and S5 is 7. So these are the responses of our respondent number 1. And of course, do not forget to click File, Save As to save your data. So in the next video, we will also be talking about data. We actually also discussed it here already, the data encoding. So maybe we can just go over that first before. Let's just delete this first. Let's clear all drawings. So aside from the discussion of the different coding, the data coding scheme, variable names and labels, value, this is value and labels, you were also able to see how the data is or how the data are encoded in our SPSS. Now let's move to data encoding. So in our example given, we were able to show how to use SPSS, or particularly a statistical analysis program. So if you're going also to use Microsoft Excel in your data encoding, so it also means that you have to just follow the rules in naming the variables, but you cannot find in Microsoft Excel the functions of the variable view. Now, for the third part of our discussion, so we will be talking about data management, particularly editing, organizations, and statistical functions and transformation. But that will be discussed in a separate video. So thank you for listening.